A, are you surprised that thus far the administration did not blink? Do you think this is part of a larger negotiation, or do we think that this is now the law of the land?
Well, I think in looking at the press release that came out this morning, the two words in the first two paragraphs are President Trump and President Trump tough on China. And I hope, for the sake of TikTok users and WeChat users around the world, not just in the United States, that this is just a last minute, let me show you how tough I am. You have to bow down to what I'm demanding. And obviously, let's hope that there is no security risk. It's hard to get into the details, but I assume that this will be resolved in the next 24 to 48 hours. I would hope so. It's going to be extremely disruptive, if not.
Can you imagine a scenario? Let's do TikTok first, but then get into WeChat. Can you imagine a scenario where if you're at Sequoia right now, or you're at General Atlantic, you have a stake in this in ByteDance, where you call up the founder and say, you know, we now have to sell a majority of this company to the United States. We just have to. But at the same time, you have the Chinese government, I believe, telling ByteDance you can't. So how do you square that?
It is tough for the owners and operators of the companies, no question about it. And it sounds like there is a deal that could be approved that could satisfy this. Again, I think we've seen in other negotiations like this, President Trump's MO is to make a grand announcement and then declare victory while accepting tiny concessions that don't move it. And my guess is that that's what the boards of the companies and the managements of the companies are hoping for. Otherwise, as your prior guest raised and everybody's talking about, there may be major retaliations here. And I know that we want to think it's America first. That's the mission. And we're going to decouple from China. But these economies are totally interlinked, not just technologically. And so that is much easier said than done. And you could easily see this escalating if we don't, in fact, resolve a situation like this.
Well, Henry, though, what does that escalation look like? And one of our viewers, by the way, points out, we were talking about WeChat, which we haven't really discussed, if there's any solve for the WeChat situation, because there's no conversation about WeChat selling any of its business to the United States. But a viewer making the point, guess what? You can't use WhatsApp, for example, in China. Why? Because the Chinese government blocks it.
It's not. Everyone is arguing it's got to be the same in both countries. It has not been for a long time. But again, our economies have still gotten incredibly interlinked. And approaching it this way, where it is last minute, huge diktat, this is the way it's going to be, it's just going to be very disruptive, even if the idea is that over the next 5 years, we really do try to decouple. And we've seen there's no way to wave a wand or say something and make it the same in both cases. And yet the idea is, I think, that both companies do well, or both economies do well, and we work toward a better situation than we've had. But as Deirdre said a few minutes ago, it's hard to understate how important or overstate how important WeChat is. It is so much more integrated into it than most of the U.S. apps that we're using for comparison.
Henry, part of me wonders whether these negotiations can actually drag on much longer than this Sunday. Maybe not for WeChat, but for TikTok. In large part, if you look at that statement and that what seems like a bizarre different date, September 20th for WeChat, but then November 12th for TikTok. Well, guess what happens between now and November 12th, the election. So if there was some political pressure on the president and the administration to end TikTok, this will allow this service to continue at least through then. And does that provide both time and provide political cover to some degree for the president and the administration over these issues?
Yes, and I thought it was great that you picked that up. And this is something that we actually see in a lot of press releases from this administration, where there are inconsistencies or something that immediately has to be clarified. But as you point out, that does leave time to actually get into the details. And so, again, my guess is that this is a big, high-profile announcement that says we're tough on China, and that there will be some extension that will at least give everybody time through that November date to figure out all the details.
Henry, we have heard that there have been a number of U.S. companies that have made calls over the last several months to the administration around the implications of shutting down WeChat. I don't know if we've heard so much about that in the context of TikTok, but if you're Tim Cook, who is happily or proudly for us oftentimes a watcher of this program, if you're waking up this morning to this news and you're Apple, how much risk do you think this puts that company in?
Well, I assume Tim Cook has better information than certainly that I have on this and has been following it and probably has a lot of lines into it. And I really do think there's a lot of showmanship here. We know this is the way our president negotiates, and sometimes he does follow through. So he is unpredictable there. But my guess is that that's the way Apple is looking at it. But yes, as you've been talking about, the idea, let's say it does escalate and there's real retaliation and suddenly Apple has to close down China, something like that. The implications are huge. This is where so many of Apple's products are made. They can't just unplug that. And so it's just that if it continues to escalate, it is a huge deal. It is not a matter of just simply decoupling and going about our own business. The global economy is not structured that way anymore.